Hello everybody. I'm out in nature again. It's a holiday, so I have the day off. I'm gonna read Evelyn Underhill. I'm not at sunset. It's Mysticism, the study of the nature and the development of spiritual consciousness. And so come along for the ride. It's been quite a ride. I didn't know it was gonna be 20 something hours, like 25 hours so far. It's a book from 1910. She influenced C.S. Lewis. She was Anglican in her faith, and she studied all these the ways of mysticism, how people developed their spiritual consciousness in different faith practices, and what the commonality is. And anyway, you can join me here. You don't have to watch any of the other videos, or after this or before, whatever. You can start at the beginning, but you're totally welcome. I just trust that it came to you today for a reason. And so let's see if I can get this stand working. Oh look, oh wow, because I brought this mic and it's not working, so I gotta have the mic close to me here. I brought a few, but I want you to see the ocean. That's the ocean. I can move. There's the sun way up in the sky because it's noon or something. I don't know what time it is. I just hiked out here to get here. I think that's enough of the sky and the ocean. I'd kind of like to have more, but there we go. All right, let's start where we are. There's more in the description about her. All right, let's just go. All the wildflowers are starting to come out. It's so beautiful. It was so beautiful in the walk here. I'm always like, just be present where you are, you know? All right. In the plain language of old-fashioned theology. Okay, so we left off with this. I read the first paragraph, I think, of this page. We're talking about the purification of the self, and we're in the second part of the book, which is called The Mystic Way. Part 2, The Mystic Way. And right now we're on the chapter 3, The Purification of the Self. I read this last time. We're only a page into this chapter, so you can take a screenshot of this. It's all free copyright. That's why I'm doing it. Not that's why. I'm led to these books. I just read whatever. I was going to read it for myself, and then I decided I wanted to share it with other people because I like doing that. And I feel called to. Anyway. So here then stands a newly awakened self, aware for the first time of reality, responding to that reality by deep movements of love and of awe. She sees herself, however, not merely to be thrust into a new world, but set at the beginning of a new road. I'm just going to start it over because we're only 2 paragraphs in, right? I mean, I'm reading it right now. We're only 2 paragraphs in this chapter. So if you're new here, that you feel welcome. And if you heard this last time, it's worth repeating. I mean, this whole book is going to be worth listening to over and over and over again. That's how I read books. But anyway. She sees herself, however, not merely to be thrust into a new world, but set at the beginning of a new road. Activity is now to be her watchword, pilgrimage, the business of her life. That a quest there is, and an inn, is the single secret spoken. Like, this is our heroic quest. Under one symbol or another, that long, slow process of transcendence, of character building, whereby she is to attain freedom, become capable of living upon high levels of reality, is present in her consciousness. Those to whom this secret is not imparted are no mystics, in the exact sense in which the word is here used, however great their temporary illumination may have been. Right? So I'm a psychologist in my day job, by the way. My name is Dr. Cheryl Meyer. I don't know if I said that. My bookmark is a rose, which always reminds me, rise, open your soul eyes, R-O-S-E. What must be the first step of the self upon this road to perfect union with the Absolute? Clearly getting rid of all those elements of normal experience which are not in harmony with reality, of illusion, evil, imperfection of every kind. By false desires and false thoughts, man has built up for himself a false universe. As a mollusk, yeah. You know, single-celled type of snail or whatever, mollusk, right? By the deliberate and persistent absorption of lime and rejection of all else, can build up for itself a hard shell which shuts it from the external world, and only represents in a distorted and unrecognizable form the ocean from which it was obtained. This hard and wholly unnutritious shell, this one-sided secretion of the surface consciousness, makes, as it were, a little cave of illusion for each separate soul. A literal and deliberate getting out of the cave must be for every mystic, as it was for Plato's prisoners, the first step in the individual hunt for reality. And so Plato talked about the people that were in the caves, and I talked about this a little last time. All they saw were the shadows, you know. You can see the shadow on the ground right now. But and so they took that for reality because the sun was shining in the shadows, but they didn't know if they left the cave, they'd actually be experiencing life. And so this is kind of like our life here. We take this, and in this, we are soul in a body, and we're in the shadowlands, but the real forms are in heaven. It's like our home is in heaven, but we're here for a reason. And like she said, we're pilgrims here as mystics because we're all called to be saints, and we're all mystics because Jesus said there will be a time when people, and I welcome all religions, right? People worship in spirit and in truth, and we're made out of spirit, so we are that. We are our spirit in physical body, given this body. In the plain language of old-fashioned theology, man's sin is stamped upon man's universe. We see a sham world because we live a sham life. We do not know ourselves, hence do not know the true character of our senses, hence attribute wrong values to their suggestions and declarations concerning our relation to the external world. That world which we have distorted by identifying it with our own self-regarding arrangement of its elements has got to reassume for us the character of reality with a capital R, of God. In the purified sight of the great mystics, it did resume this character. Their shells were opened wide. They knew the tides of the eternal sea. This lucid apprehension of the true, with a capital T, is what we mean when we speak of the illumination which results from a faithful acceptance of the trials of the purgative way. I kept seeing on the way here, you know, I don't know if I had to do it. I might as well. Might as well for us, for an illustration for a second. I don't know what it's going to look like because my camera's on the floor. Oops. And so I just did that for us. It's like if you stand in a tree pose. I was seeing like the lawyers, the scales of balance, you know, you see both sides at once. And I was looking at, all these trials and stuff that are coming into my friends' lives and our lives and whatever, and accepting all of it with balance on the way up here. That's what was going on in the back of my mind as I was just quieting my mind to meditate on the way here. And so that pose is just kind of like a picture of it. Of not buying into the ebb and flow while you just stand there and, let's say, balance your arms out or just balance on one leg. But anyway, you're just taking the good with the bad and not necessarily even labeling it. All of it is of God, from God. I mean, she'll talk about it more. She'll describe it more. It's not like God wanted Job to suffer. If we read the book of Job, you learn all about this. But he allowed it to happen, And Ecclesiastes is really good teaching this too. Because Solomon knew wisdom. The purgative way, a faithful acceptance of the trials of the purgative way. The normal self as it exists in the normal world, the old Adam of St. Paul, is wholly incapable of supersensual adventure. All its activities are grouped about a center of consciousness whose correspondence are with the material world, I was seeing that also in when you say, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." You're bringing God's, the will of divine love, into the earth. And then when you say, "Lead us not into temptation," some people describe that as lead us out from materiality, but not where you're not material anymore, but just worshiping matter. Lead us out from that. Deliver us from evil. I did this whole study on the Aramaic of that, so that's a lot longer conversation we have for now. I'll just leave it. Let's see if she explains it. So St. Paul says, with the old Adam of St. Paul, who is wholly incapable of supersensual adventure, all its activities are grouped about a center of consciousness whose correspondence are with the material world. In the moment of its awakening, it is abruptly made aware of this disability. It knows itself finite. It now inspires to the infinite. It is encased in the hard crust of individuality. It aspires to union with a larger self. It is fettered. It longs for freedom. Its every sense is attuned to illusion. It craves for harmony with the absolute truth. God is the only reality, says Patmore, and we are real only as far as we are in his order, and he is in us. Whatever form, then, the mystical adventure may take, it must be preceded by a change in the attitude of the subject, a change which will introduce it to the order of reality and enable it to set up permanent relations with an object which is not normally part of its universe. Therefore, though the end of mysticism is not goodness, it entails the acquirement of goodness. Oh, wow. Okay, so your goal, like my friend Elliot, I met him. He had 6 songs or something or 5 or 6 in the movie Good Will Hunting. And I think about that a lot, Good Will Hunting. It's like you're hunting for this goodwill. But what she's saying is accurate and true, is being good isn't your end aim. It's like union with God is. And God is love. God is divine love. God is isness. God is the absolute one, beingness. And so, I think C.S. Lewis talks a lot about people who try to be good. He says, you have to put first things first. So goodness is acquired along this path, but it's not goodness that brings you this. That's why you can't, like the Pharisees could not see, these religious people that kept washing the outside of the cup could not see, Jesus could not recognize his goodness. Because when we're in our egotism, we keep trying to be the idea of that thing instead of the actual thing. You know, the idea of spiritual, you know, or the idea of I'm detached, you know, instead of actually, it's like someone told me, and I kept coming back to that on the way up here. It was like, don't try to be present in the now, just be present. And that helps me a lot. You're not shifting. Your mind goes on the system of mood and feelings and thoughts, and it's stuck on all this, and it keeps wanting to attach to all of those. Your soul, its mode is presence. But these are just words too. So, but those have helped me a lot. So, but don't let them get in the way. If they don't help you, let them go. So, whatever form then the mystical adventure may take, it must be preceded by a change in the attitude of the subject, a change which will introduce it into the order of reality and enable it to set up permanent relations with an object with a capital O, which is not normally part of its universe. Therefore, though the end of mysticism is not goodness, it entails the acquirement of goodness. The virtues are the ornaments of the spiritual marriage. Wow. So the virtues. I know the fruits of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, which is patience, which is not the same as inviting a narcissist to keep walking on you. Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, meekness. Meekness and gentleness are the same. And self-control, self-restraint. You're not just giving in to your senses and letting your senses hook you in and pull you, and all your thoughts direct you. And so those are some of the virtues. They're not the 7 cardinal virtues. I don't think my mind, I'd have to be, I had a concussion 2 weeks ago, and so I'm not straining my mind to find things. If they don't come to me, then I'm just letting the book speak for itself. But I've been a psychologist for over 20 years, so I say I've been studying this for 30, more than that, because I've always been interested in the spiritual path. Always, since I was a little girl. Anyway, the virtues are the ornaments of the spiritual marriage. And so if you're in union with divine love, it's like, obviously, you're going to be dressed with divine love. The virtues will come out of that. It's like we read in the last chapter, she was saying, I think it was St. Catherine of Genoa was saying, no more sin, no more sin, you know. She just didn't want anything to separate her from this love that she wanted to emanate through herself, you know. And so it creates the ornaments of virtue. And so it's so opposite of trying to get all the virtues. Anyway, because that marriage is union with the good, no less than with the beautiful, with a capital B, and the true. So the virtues are the ornaments of the spiritual marriage, because that marriage is union with the good, no less than with the beautiful, and the true. And that, it's like one of my favorite quotes is Dostoevsky. In the end, the world will be saved by beauty. This is the true beauty of union with the divine. Wouldn't that be beautiful if the whole world yielded to divine love, you know? Primarily then, the self must be purged of all that stands. Oh, that's so funny. I put this in my hair on the way here. I don't know if you can see it. It's a little butterfly clip, because I was just like, okay, it's time to not that I want to force it, but to change from the caterpillar to the butterfly. It's time to fly, right? Primarily then, the self must be purged of all that stands between it and goodness, putting on the character of reality instead of the character of illusion or sin. The word sin means to miss the point, to miss the mark, to miss the point of all of life. You know, it's like if you see like a dartboard or a bullseye, you know, it's like when you keep aiming and you're aiming over here, it's like, no, go over this way, go over this way. You're missing the mark, you know, you're missing the point. The point is love, is divine love, is being one with that, being what we came from. It longs ardently to do this. So putting on the character of reality instead of the character of illusion or sin. It longs ardently to do this from the first moment in which it sees itself in the all-revealing radiance of the uncreated light. When once love openeth the inner eye of the soul for to see this truth, says Hilton, with other circumstances that attend it, then beginneth the soul to be really humble, for then, through the sight of God, it feeleth and seeth itself as it is, and then doth the soul forsake the beholding and leaning upon itself. So it stops leaning upon itself. Hold on, I'm hoping they stop. Well, I mean, I want them to play their music, but I might need to move because then it triggers, you know, copyright stuff, whatever. Anyway, okay, so, it longs ardently to do this from the first moment in which it sees itself in the all... Okay, so with other circumstances that attend it, then it begins the soul to be really humble, for through the sight of God, it feels... It's like... Oh, I know. Yeah, this morning in morning prayer, they read about, you know, I'm just going to hold this for a second. They read about, you know, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. If your hand, and he said, you know, obviously it's not like, it's like if you recognize, if you see the divine, if you see divine love, if you understand God and you see that, like, oh, this thing is keeping me from going to heaven, from experiencing heaven right now, from experiencing the love of God right now in me, and the love of God flowing through me to other people, like this wind, you know, this natural love. This sin that I keep going back to is blocking that. This insistence on, you know, going back and trying to get someone from my childhood to love me or to earn my approval or whatever it is that we do, you know. It says, you know, not that, he said, I was stoked, our bishop was like, it's not that you go, you know, pluck, it's not that you go cut your eye out when you go home, you know. It's like we have the ability to go to God and ask for forgiveness, but it's just like, if it takes violence, you know, and one of the fruits of the Spirit is gentleness. So I don't think we have to do this violently, because but Jesus, when he cleaned out the temple, right? So if we're on the chapter on purgation, right? When he cleaned out the temple, he took the time to break, it said he made a whip. So it's showing he wasn't acting out of our reactive triggered anger like we might act out of. He braided the whip and cleared out all these people that were ripping people off and selling them these overpriced, you know, animals so that they could have oneness back with God. They could have forgiveness in that old way that didn't last, you know. And so it's just like, and he's in the lineage of David. So it was his temple, actually, you know, if you really think of it, Jesus was in the lineage of David through Mary and through Joseph. And so for him to go clean out the temple, it's like cleaning out his father's house and his great-great-grandfather's house, great-great-great, however many greats. You know what I mean? He's in that lineage. So he had every right to do so, to clean out, because of the spiritual meaning and the physical meaning. So he had every right to do that, and he ought to do that, you know? And if we are created by God, you know, then this is it. You know, this is it. This is a cleaning that gets to take place in us. But there's a choice involved, and so let's see what that choice entails, you know. But once you see this picture of divine love, you're like, nope, why would I choose anything less than that? Nope, like, take it all. It's just like if someone offered you, oh, I know, in the Count of Monte Cristo, he comes up with a wagon full of like jewels and gold, and he offers the guy, you know, hey, we came here to buy your house, and the guy, and it's this giant estate, and he's like, what are you talking about? You know, and then he opens the wagon and all these jewels fall out. In the one with Jim Caviezel, the guy that played Jesus, right? The actor that played Jesus. And so it's like that. It's like, you see that, everyone's like, oh, that person's just trying to be holy. And it's just like, no, you see the love of God, and you see it's just like this, you know. It's like nothing. I sing that song a lot, just the chorus part. Nothing compares to you. Because I just see that all the time. It's like, just take it already. I'm sorry, my eyes got, you know, anyway. So let's see, she'll talk. So with Dante, the first terrace of the Mount of Purgatory is devoted to the cleansing of pride and the production of humility. Okay, so that's one of the virtues, is humility, and that's one of the vices. There's seven virtues that match with the seven vices. So pride is on one side, humility is the other. Gluttony is on one side. I think fasting of some kind is on the other. But such a process is the inevitable, one might almost say mechanical result of a vision, however fleeting, of reality with a capital R, an undistorted sight of the earthbound self. All its life, it has been measuring its candlelight by other candles. Now, for the first time, it is out in the open air and sees the sun, right? The sun. Where is the sun? Right there. And so you were comparing yourself to other candles, and you kept trying to be so good in that, you know. And it's like that. That's what I was just talking about. That's funny. I hadn't read ahead. This is the way, said the voice of God to St. Catherine of Siena in ecstasy. She was in ecstasy. So God says to her, this is the way. If thou wilt arrive at perfect knowledge and enjoyment of me, the eternal truth, thou shouldst never go outside, the knowledge of thyself. If thou wilt arrive at perfect knowledge and enjoyment of me, with a capital M, the eternal truth, thou shouldst never go outside the knowledge of thyself, and by humbling thyself in the valley of humility, thou wilt know me and thyself, from which knowledge thou wilt draw all that is necessary. Here, this is a quote. In self-knowledge, then, thou wilt humble thyself, seeing that in thyself thou dost not even exist. Wow. That's what the Native Americans say. I learned from a Native American Christian shaman, a guy named Red Elk. He said that we're all, you know, they look at it, you know, you don't have to, like we're all in the mind womb of God. We're all in God's dream. So like, you know, you're a candle like inside the sun anyway, you know. And so you were relying on yourself, and it's just like, just humble yourself. Anyway, I'm going to read that quote again. So St. Catherine of Siena in ecstasy, God said to her, if thou wilt arrive at a perfect knowledge and enjoyment of me, the eternal truth, thou shouldest never go outside the knowledge of thyself, and by humbling thyself in the valley of humility, thou wilt know me and thyself, from which knowledge thou wilt draw all that is necessary. And there's ellipsis. In self-knowledge, then, thou wilt humble thyself, seeing that in thyself thou does not even exist. Rumi says, I think it's Rumi, you know, the Sufi poet Rumi says, it's like we're in the ocean and we're asking God for water, you know, we're like the fish in the ocean asking where's the water, and you're swimming in it already. The first thing that the self observes when it turns back upon itself in that moment of lucidity enters, as St. Catherine says, into, quote, the cell of self-knowledge, end quote, is the horrible contrast between its clouded contours and the pure sharp radiance of the real, between its muddled, faulty life its perverse self-centered drifting, and the clear onward sweep of that becoming in which it is immersed. It is then that the outlook of rapture and awe receives the countersign of humility, the harbinger of that new self which must be born appears under the aspect of a desire, a passionate longing to escape from the suddenly perceived hatefulness of selfhood and to conform to reality with a capital R. This is R in sign language. The perfect, which it has seen under its aspect of goodness, of beauty, or of love, to be worthy of it, in fact, to be real. This showing, says Gerlach, G-E-R-L-A-C, Gerlach Peterson, of that experience, this showing, says Gerlach Peterson, of that experience, quote, is so vehement and so strong that the whole of the interior man, not only of his heart, but of his body, is marvelously moved and shaken and faints within itself, unable to endure it. And by this means, his interior aspect is made clear, without any cloud, and conformable in its own measure to him whom he seeks. So it's like, what do they say? You know, pray like God is doing all of it, and row like you are doing all of it. It's both and somehow, but it's like, if you keep thinking that you're trying is going to get you there, you know, that's why the prayer, the Jesus prayer, you know, on that pilgrimage book, I can't remember the name right now because that the other side of my brain. The way of the pilgrim is, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. You're always asking God's mercy because it keeps bringing you in humility. And there's a psalm that's quoted in St. John of the Cross, where David, who's the king, who has all of the jewels and everything and the gold, and he says, I am poor, because you recognize that you are poor, and you keep saying, I am poor to God. And it's like the world will keep telling you to say the mantra, I am rich. And it's like, so it's like when I kept finding, when I said, I am poor, I recognized that everything I have is nothing compared to that, you know? And you start seeing the richness of God that he wants to pour in you. And so it's this path of true humility, but it's not from trying to be humble, you know? Believe me, I've tried all of these. It's like, there's this song, it goes, light of the world, shine on me, love is the answer, shine on us all, set us free, love is the answer. And he says this line, it's Todd Rudgreen, I think that's his name. He was before my time, but he's like, if there's a shortcut, I'd have found it. I'm like, I really relate with that, you know? But there's no easy way around it. Just asking, light of the world, shine on me like the sun. Love is the answer, you know? Anyway, I always feel like songs take us beyond our defenses. That's why I do my soul songs and stuff. But anyway, it's so vehement, so strong that the whole of the interior man, not only of his heart, but of his body, is marvelously moved and shaken and faints within itself, unable to endure it. And by this means, his interior aspect is made clear without any cloud and conformable in its own measure to him with a capital H, whom he seeks. The lives of the mystics abound in instances of the vehemence of this showing, of the deep-seated sense of necessity which urges the newly awakened self to a life of discomfort and conflict, often to intense poverty and pain, as the only way of replacing false experience by true. Here the transcendental consciousness, exalted by a clear intuition of its goal, and not merely counting, but perceiving the world to be obviously well lost for such a prize, takes the reins, right? It's not... I know I was talking to God on the way up here about, but you told me to count the cost. I don't care what the cost is. I don't know how to count it. You count it. I don't want to count it, you know. Help me any cost that comes up. But it's saying, that's so funny that I was thinking that. Here, the transcendental consciousness, exalted by a clear intuition of its goal, and not merely, quote, counting, but perceiving the world to be obviously well lost for such a prize, takes the reins. It forces on the unwilling surface mind a sharp vision of its own disabilities, its ugly and imperfect life. The love of ideal beauty, capital I and B, ideal beauty, which is closely bound up with the mystic temperament, makes this instant response. No more sins, was the first cry of St. Catherine of Genoa. Oh, I'm so glad she went back to that. In the crucial hour in which she saw by the light of love the ugly and distorted nature of her past, she entered forthwith upon the purgative way, in which for 4 years she suffered under a profound sense of imperfection, endured fasting, solitude, and mortification, and imposed upon herself the most repulsive duties in her efforts that self-conquest which should make her conformable in her own measure to the dictates of that pure love, with a capital P and L, pure love, which was the aspect of reality that she had seen. It is the inner conviction that this conformity, this transcendence of the unreal is possible, and indeed normal, which upholds the mystic during the terrible years of purgation, so that not only without heaviness, but with a joy unmeasured, he casts back all things that may him let. That may him let. I think it's like old-fashioned language that are letting you, like keeping you back. So that not only without heaviness, but with a joy unmeasured, he casts back all thing that may him let. That's from Richard Rolle, The Mending of Life. I have a PDF link to this book, so you can see all the footnotes, I think, in the description. To the true lover of the absolute, purgation, no less than illumination, is a privilege, a dreadful joy. It is the earnest of increasing life. Let me suffer or die, said Saint Teresa of Avila, right? A strange alternative in the ears of common sense, but a forced option in the spiritual sphere. However harsh its form, however painful the activities to which it spurs him, or her, the mystic recognizes in this breakup of his old universe an essential part of the great work, and the act in which he turns to it as an act of love, no less than an act of will. Burning of love into a soul truly taken, all vices purgeth. Oh, sorry, there's a quote again. I was thinking two things at once for even a moment when you do that, I was thinking of turning the camera again. Quote, burning of love into a soul truly taken, all vices purgeth, and ellipsis. For whilst the true lover with strong and fervent desire into God is born, all things him displease, that from the sight of God withdraw. So everything starts displeasing you, that makes you withdraw from God. You're like, this isn't God. It reminded me on the way up here, again, it's an hour walk, so for this to this space or so. That to its act of love, no less than an act of will, breakup of the old universe is an essential part of it. I can't remember what I was going to say, so I'll just go back. However harsh its form, however painful the activities to which it spurs him, the mystic recognizes in this breakup of his old universe an essential part of the great work, and the act in which he turns to it is an act of love, no less than an act of will. Burning of love into a soul truly taken all vices purgeth. Okay, for whilst the true lover with strong and fervent desire into God is born, all things him displease, from the sight of God withdraw. His eyes once opened, he is eager for that ordering of his disordered loves, which alone can establish his correspondence with the transcendental life. Teach me only joy, cries Suso, the way in which I may bear upon my body the marks of thy love. Come, my soul, depart from outward things, and gather thyself together into a true interior silence, that thou mayest set out with all thy courage and bury and lose thyself in the desert of deep contrition. It is in this torment of contrition, this acute consciousness of unworthiness, that we have the first swing back of the oscillating self from the initial state of mystic pleasure to the complementary state of pain. It is, so to speak, on its transcendental side, the reflex action which follows the first touch of God. Thus we read what Ruhlmann Merswin quote, swept away by the transports of divine love, did not surrender himself to the passive enjoyment of this first taste of absolute being, but was impelled by it to diligent and instant self-criticism. He was seized with the hatred of his body and inflicted on himself such hard mortifications that he fell ill. It is useless for lovers of healthy mindedness to resent this and similar examples of self-examination and penance, to label them morbid or medieval. The fact remains that only such bitter knowledge of wrongness of relation, seen by the light of ardent love, can spur the will of man to the hard task of readjustment. You know, it's just like St. Francis of Assisi. He saw, Jesus spoke to him through the crucifix, through the painting. The words moved, you know. I mean, his lips moved and said, rebuild this house. And I was thinking, he started rebuilding that church, rebuild this church. But we are, you know, it says, the Lord is in his holy temple. Let the whole earth keep silence before him. The Lord, God, is in here. And so it's like in the temple, he's in his holy temple. And so it's like, rebuild this in the right order. God will do that. God will keep showing you how. But we have to yield. We have to yield, or it doesn't just happen. The fact remains that only such bitter knowledge of wrongness of relation, seen by the light of ardent love, can spur the will of man to the hard task of readjustment. I saw full surely, says Julian of Norwich, that it behooveth needs to be that we should be in longing and in penance until the time that we be led so deep into God that we verily and truly know our own soul. Dante's whole journey up the Mount of Purgation is the dramatic presentation of this one truth. So too the celebrated description of purgatory attributed to St. Catherine of Genoa is obviously founded upon its author's inward experience of this purgative way. In it, she applies to the souls of the dead her personal consciousness of the necessity of purification, its place in the organic process of spiritual growth. It is, as she acknowledges at the beginning, the projection of her own psychological adventures upon the background of the spiritual world, its substance being simply the repetition, after death, of that eager and heroic acceptance of suffering, those drastic acts of purification which she herself has been compelled to undertake under the whip of the same psychic necessity, that of removing the rust of illusion, cleansing the mirror in order that it may receive the divine light. It is, she says, as with a covered object. The object cannot respond to the rays of the sun, not because the sun ceases to shine, for it shines without intermission, but because the covering intervenes. You know, if we're like a mirror, there's a covering that's blocking the sun. You know, we just take the covering off. Ask divine love to take this covering off. Enter into the way of purgation. Like Jesus, it said he scorned the cross, but accepted it, you know, with the looking for the joy. It's in Philippians 2, for the joy set before him of setting us free, you know. He took the punishment upon himself so that the way could be opened for us to go back. But we share the cross. He says, take up your cross daily and follow me. So there is like that balance. When I was standing, there is the cross. So we have to face on this. It's not all, it is all sunshine and rainbows at the same time, and unicorns, you know. I was looking at these little girls yesterday. They all were carrying unicorns and had unicorns on their shirts and all these magic, you know, like sparklies around, you know, around on their jackets and stuff, and it says unicorns are real. And I was just reflecting in my soul because I was in just this divine sort of relaxation state, and I was like, why the unicorns? Why are they so magical? Because they were to me too rainbows and unicorns. It's like, and it's like if you see the prism, there's a hawk right there. If you see the prism through the light, you know, it looks like white light, but it's the prism of the rainbow, like God showed. And some people who say they can see the different energy centers on our bodies, see the different colors like the rainbow, just shining. But, you know, I'm not going to go into that. But the unicorn, I was thinking, look at this. Right, so close. I would always be turning my camera around for so many videos before, and the hawks would be so far up in the mountains that you couldn't see them. But unicorns is one. I was like, oh, that's like our soul has a longing to go back to the one. You know, we came from one God, and this unicorn has one horn. You know, they're magic. And anyway, you don't have to agree with me. It's just a knowing that came to me from the joy of, you know, Jesus said you must be like a little child to enter back in the kingdom of God. Little children just know these things, you know. They're fine with the rainbows and the unicorns and the flying Pegasus horses, because we're meant to fly. Anyway, so the projection of our own psychological, the purgative way. In it, she applies to the souls of the dead. Okay, we already said that. To the purification which she has herself been compelled to undertake under the whip of the same psychic necessity, that of removing the rust of illusion, cleansing the mirror in order that it may receive the divine light. It is, she says, as with a covered object, the object cannot respond to the rays of the sun, not because the sun ceases to shine, for it shines without intermission, but because the covering intervenes. Let the covering be destroyed, and again the object will be exposed to the sun, and will answer to the rays which beat against it in proportion as the work of destruction advances. Thus, the souls are covered by a rust, that is, by sin, which is gradually consumed away by the fire of purgatory. The more it is consumed, the more they respond to God, their true sun. See, some people say that, like Tutankhamun, whatever, was like a sun worshiper. And maybe, I'm not saying for sure I wasn't there, but, well, maybe, I don't know. I'm not going to go into that, but I'm just saying, like, it's like, they became monotheists at that time, and it's like, I have this idea that they understood that the sun was like a representation of the oneness of God. We have one sun, you know, but God is our true sun. And anyway, their happiness increases as the rust falls off and lays them open to the divine ray. The instinctive tendency to seek happiness in God develops itself and goes on increasing through the fire of love, which draws it to its end with such impetuosity and vehemence that any obstacle seems intolerable, and the more clear its vision, the more extreme its pain. That's in Trattato de Purgatoria. No. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Anyway, oh no, she's gonna read in some different language. Monstratim la via de guerre au monte, cries the souls of the newly dead in Dante's vision. So that maybe that's Italian. Pushed by the instinctive tendency towards the purifying flames. I think a monte is the world, la via is the way. Monstra, mostra, tame, mostratene, something. Anyway, you get to look this up and put it in the comments if you know it in Italian. I'll show it right here, so you don't have to look it up on the PDF. It's the line above the bookmark, a few lines. Anyway, tell us. Pushed by that instinctive tendency, I'm like, I can't do everything. God is doing most of this, it's great. By that instinctive tendency towards the purifying flame, such a tendency, such a passionate desire, the aspiring self must have. No cool, well-balanced knowledge of the need of new adjustments will avail to set it on the purgative way. This is a heroic act and demands heroic passions in the soul. For sure, your passions that you had before must be used for this, you know? And so it's not a problem that you were passionate before. God takes all of it and uses it for good when we surrender it, you know? Quote, in order to overcome our desires and to deny ourselves in all things, says St. John of the Cross, who is the classic authority upon this portion of the mystic quest. Oh yeah, there was someone I read the other day that he was called the doctor of detachment. Go figure, I'm so glad she's talking about him. So he is the classic authority upon this portion of the mystic quest. Quote, our love and inclination for which we are wont to so to inflame the will that it delights therein, we require another and greater fire of another and nobler love, that of the bridegroom. So that having all our joy in him and deriving from him all our strength, we may gain such resolution and courage as shall enable us easily to abandon and deny all besides. It was necessary, in order to subdue our sensual desire, not only to have this love for the bridegroom, but also to be on fire therewith, and that with anxiety, ellipsis, if our spiritual nature were not on fire with other and nobler anxieties for that which is spiritual, we should never overcome our natural and sensible satisfactions, nor be able to enter on the night of sense. Neither should we have the courage to remain in the darkness, in the denial of every desire. Wow. How does anybody love on this earth? Anybody love another person, you know? If they don't know this love. Hi. Are you speaking Italian?
No, Spanish.
Oh, Spanish.
Yeah.
I was just reading something in Italian. Do you know what this means? Can you read it? I just was like, I don't know this. It's in Italian. It's Dante.
Mostrami la via di del monte.
Do you know how it?
Something
Show
about
me
life.
the way to the mountain.
Or something like that.
The way of the mountain. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. We got a translation. I'm doing a reading, and I was like,
okay.
Someone put in the comments if you know Italian. That's great. I know Spanish, but not as well as you. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you. That's exactly what we're talking about. So that's it. Thank you so much. No one comes down here. No one, like that guy just rode by on his bike, but I'm down below so that they can take pictures of the horizon above. It was necessary in order to subdue our sin. Okay, and so, isn't that beautiful? I can't cut this. I hope if my phone cuts off now, like I won't cut this, so you'll see it wasn't edited.
St. John of the Cross writes the ascent of Mount Carmel. That's show me the way to the mountain. This is how the divine love shows up for you, for me, for all of us. I'm so glad no one knows me right now so that I can post this when I get home, you know. I know other people that have lots and lots of followers, and sometimes it's really hard for them to get their videos up. Sometimes for me too. I don't want to say anything about that. I just leave it to God. But because he's hidden me so that this can come to you from a hidden place. I'm not monetized by anything right now, so I can say whatever, you know. It is necessary to be on fire with love, and that with anxiety. Only this deep and ardent passion for a perceived object of love can persuade the mystic to those unnatural acts of abnegation on which he kills or she kills his or her lesser love of the world of sense, frees herself or himself from the remora of desire, unifies all his energies about the new and higher center of his life. His business, I have said, is transcendence, a mounting up and attainment of a higher order of reality. Once his eyes have been opened on eternity, his instinct for the absolute, roused from its sleep, sees union with that reality as his duty no less than his joy. Sees too that this union can only be consummated on a plane where illusion and selfhood have no place. Sees too that this union can only be consummated on a plane where illusion and selfhood have no place. It's like all the loves that we have here are just so small compared to this. And that's why I was thinking, even if you have someone that you love, like your spouse, you have to hold them loosely up to God so that they have this free love keep flowing through them. They need to have this freedom, you know? It's this freedom of this divine path. This is why people get so codependent with each other and so disappointed and disillusioned and stuff. Because we all, it's like almost like we need the mystic way first, you know? Anyway. Better late than never. I always say that to myself on the way to church. I've been better at being on time, but the inward voice says to him perpetually at the least seasonable moments, Demita omnia transitoria, care eterna. Let's see. That's from the Imitation of Christ. Imitation of Christ. Thomas Kempis wrote that. But that looks like Latin. Something about transitory. Anyway, hence the purgation of the senses and of the character which they have helped to build is always placed first in order in the mystic way. Though sporadic flashes of illumination and ecstasy may, and often do, precede and accompany it, since spiritual no less than physical existence is, as we know it, an endless becoming, with a capital B, it too has no end. Like we get a new body, you know, anyway. In a sense, the whole of the mystical experience in this life consists in a series of purifications whereby the finite slowly approaches the nature of its infinite source, climbing up the cleansing mountain pool by pool, like the industrious fish in Roman Merswin's vision, until it reaches its origin with a capital O. The greatest of the contemplative saints, far from leaving purgation behind them in their progress, were increasingly aware of their own inadequateness, the nearer they approached to the unitive state. For the true lover of the absolute, like every other lover, is alternatively abased and exalted by his unworthiness and his good fortune. It's like there's a song that goes, out of my league, you know. She was out of my league. That's what we feel like with God. There are moments of high rapture when he knows only that the banner over him is love. I am my beloved's and he is mine. His banner over me is love. I was saying the other day, his hashtag over me is love. That's what I was getting in my soul. You know, if he has to hashtag us, it's like, it's love, right? It's not all my wrongs from the past and all my stupidities are all yours. It's love. And so, for the lover, like every other lover, is alternately abased and exalted. There are moments of high rapture when he knows only that the banner over him is love, but there are others in which he remains bitterly conscious that in spite of his uttermost surrender, there is within him or her an ineradicable residuum of selfhood which stains the white radiance of eternity, like the light, the bright light. I'm going to read one more little section, because the next verse section is detachment over here. It says detachment. So I'll read to that. So it's going to be a couple minutes, over an hour. In this sense, then, purification is a perpetual process. That which mystical writers mean, however, when they speak of the way of purgation is rather the slow and painful completion of conversion. Oh, I was wondering. I was like, I was converted when I was like 4, you know? But no, this is the completion, this purgation. The Catholic people will say that it's like your experience, the more you go through this purgation here, you don't have to go through what they understand as purgatory in the next, in between, whatever that is. But to be absent with the body is present with the Lord. But so is right now. To be absent from your senses, you're present with God right now. Anyway. It is the drastic turning of the self from the unreal to the real life, a setting of her house in order, an orientation of the mind to truth. Its business is the getting rid, first of self-love, and secondly of all those foolish interests in which the surface consciousness is steeped. The essence of purgation, says Richard of St. Victor, is self-simplification. Nothing can happen until this has proceeded a certain distance, till the involved interests and tangled motives of the self are simplified and the false complications of temporal life are recognized and cast away. No one, says another authority in this matter, can be enlightened unless he be first cleansed or purified and stripped. There's this woman named Latoya Okia from like this little town in Atlanta, and she's just like, God needs to strip you, you know, like, you know, you got to get in the, what does she say? It's so awesome, because she's saying all the same things as the mystics, but the Holy Spirit's just revealing it to her. She's one of the people that has 175,000 followers right now. I've worked with her. She's helped me see things on this path, you know, because I've gone on some ways, maybe if you say further, and then she's gone on some ways further. And so it's like as iron sharpens iron. But she's like, you know, no one's too dirty for God's washing machine to clean. I love it. She's like, you know, just get on in. Let God clean you. Anyway, no one, says another authority in this matter, can be enlightened unless he first be cleansed or purified and stripped. Purgation, which is the remaking of character in conformity with perceived reality, consists in these two essential acts: the cleansing of that which is to remain, the stripping of that which is to be done away. It may best be studied, therefore, in 2 parts, and I think that it will be in the reader's interest if we reverse the order which the, quote, theological Germanica adopts, and first consider negative purification or self-stripping, and the next positive purification or character adjustment. And I have this example that someone talked to me about, like this gangrene thing, you know, that was like can travel up your leg or whatever, and you know, and you have to amputate. But it's like, if someone comes in, someone described this, someone coming in and cleaning all this stuff up and digging really deep, like a nurse cleaning, and it just, I wanted to throw up at the sound of it. But it's just like Aslan in the book I've talked about before, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Eustace comes and he had become a dragon, and he tried to take off his peel, his outer shell. Oh wow, the hawk is back. And eventually Aslan had to reach in and pull it off, and it hurt really bad, right? But he wanted it off. He just didn't want to be a dragon anymore. That's what it's like. These then are the branches. So or the self-stripping, the next negative purification, or self-stripping, the next positive purification, or character adjustment. These then are the branches into which this subject will here be split. The negative aspect, the stripping or purging away of those superfluous, unreal, and harmful things which dissipate. I'm always talking about dissipation when we say, give us this day our daily bread. You know, don't dissipate this manna that's given to you from heaven. The purging away those superfluous, unreal, and harmful things which dissipate the precious energies of the self. This is the business of poverty or detachment. The positive aspect, a raising to their highest term, their purest state of all that remains, the permanent elements of character. This is brought about by mortification, the gymnastic of the soul, a deliberate recourse to painful experiences and difficult tasks. But you see, they're all worth it. It's just like, you know, if you could save your foot or your leg, would you do that? Fine, clean it off, whatever it takes, cut away, you know. If you could save one of your child's life by giving them, you know, some of your blood, or I forgot what else you can donate, you know, whatever, on my mind still. Anyway, you'd be like, all right, let's go through the surgery, you know. It's like that. I wish you so much love. Feel free to take the time to like this and share it to other people and other hidden people, or other people that, you know, if it comes up in conversation and you think of these videos, just send them to them, you know. Put in the effort as God calls you. But don't ignore that calling, because when he calls us to do stuff and we don't, then I heard that call gets fainter. And so it's just like Rumi says again, how it doesn't matter, blah, 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 something before. It's how quickly you will obey that voice now, when it is the voice of divine love, of God. Christ in us, the hope of glory. Anyway, like, share, and comment. Comment your favorite part, or some reverie that came up to you while you were in the middle of this, you know, or anything. All right. I wish you so much love. Thank you. I honor your presence.